Good morning, Will. How are you?
Very well, Mark. How are you doing?
Not bad. I'm in Stockholm today. Where are you?
I am in the French Alps. I'm very lucky to be here just as we have a bit of a break for the Easter period.
Well, I've had the last week in the Norden area. We're going to focus on Norden as a really interesting geopolitical change that's happening. And for our leaders, this is really useful to understand when chaos is running at one particular speed. If you're going to stay ahead, you need to be running faster with your change than chaos is running at. And I think the Nordic countries are doing that very, very well.
Yeah, and it's been a tumultuous period, particularly over security issues, really interesting and long borders, but actually a lot that defines that area of the world as a collective as well.
Exactly, and we've seen it's been a year since the US said the old world order is on hold and that we're now in the next world order. And in that year, we've seen Canada say, well, Nordic countries, you're Arctic alliance countries, and so is Canada. We should relate better together. We've seen the Baltic nations turn around and do possibly one of the most amazing things, which they've even begun to rip up the railway lines that used to connect their capitals to Moscow, one, to stop invasion. But they now have this rail plan to go and actually run north south so that they are more connected into Europe through Poland. And so we're looking at how does Poland, how does Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Canada, and the traditional Scandinavian countries, how do they actually come into being the next Norden district? And what does that mean as far as the potential from an economy, for the change in the way that people think of themselves? It's a very interesting time.
Yeah, it's hugely interesting. And I think, from a leader's perspective, the thinking that's worth sharing is around the world being in flux. So we've got different levels of change, or different speeds of change, I should say, some affected by things like population shift, and others affected by political decision making, which of course we know is incredibly unpredictable at this point in history as well. So maybe we should just touch on responsiveness.
Well, the responsiveness is really interesting. That the One of the things that happens in ice-based nations is that they go get weather events. So tropical nations get weather events where it blows and you can't be on the street, or you get floods and you can't be on the street. Ice-based nations get this condition, which is it snows and it blows, but you still need to be on the street. So they're quite used to adapting, and they're quite used to the idea that, as with my neighbours, I need to collaborate. We all need to clear our driveway so that we can go get on with life. And it was actually my former father-in-law who taught me this. For those that don't know, I was married to a gorgeous Swedish lady, and her father had this place out in the country. And he actually had like a Hatfields McCoy relationship with the neighbours, where they didn't really like each other, and there were things that went back multiple generations, but they still collaborated to make sure that in the winter that the driveway was clear. And that pragmatism is very interesting. So you're seeing an adaptation of saying, maybe this isn't exactly who we imagine we are as Swedes or Finns or Danes or Norwegians, but it would be important for us to think if our world, that where we had export to America that was safe and secure, that we actually think of that as export to Canada or export to the Baltic nations, that our trading relationships need to adapt and change because the previous circumstance has gone, just like a clear street in a snowstorm means that you have to come into that collaboration and cooperation mode. So I've seen the speed of response from people's thinking to be incredible. And I think that's a really good example for our leaders to think, how fast are you adapting to next? Because now is actually not the past, it's actually a new context, and it's how fast you change is whether you have lag or whether you actually get back up to momentum faster.
Yeah, it is really interesting to think about that notion of acting collectively as well. I mean, we were touching on things like supply chains, for example, and readjusting kind of economic focus and being able to have some more and better self-sufficiency. And then it's just that level of coordination across a defined area of the world, I suppose, and that collective sense of working together as well.
And so this brings in a really interesting part about design. Designing is solved. Okay. So the challenge for people, particularly in Sweden at the moment, is how do they solve the fact that they need to improve logistics and logistics reliability for supply chain challenges? It used to be that they were trying to work out how to convince people to buy their product. And now they're finding out that they have to work out how do they make sure that there's enough material coming through for the backlog of orders that they have. And we know there's a certain point where a backlog of orders becomes a failed contract. So they need to make sure that they're delivering on that opportunity, because there's one thing to have a contract that says, I will buy from you. There is another thing to actually deliver it. You don't get paid and you don't get the economic growth until you've delivered. So supply chain design is really important, but that's about designing systems that solve the current condition. And again, that gets back to our designers thinking about we're in this era where the rate that we're going to need to solve things is dramatically greater than it was before. If we go think of user experience, you used to have that it was like, 3 or 4 levels down that you would be focusing at. Were you tweaking the user experience to optimize it? Now, because the conditions have changed, we've got to go up to a much higher level, get to some of those primary considerations, make sure the systemic changes are there, and then start to drill down on that finesse again. About adaptation, it's about rate of change. But as designers, we know this. How do we convey that through to our customers who are actually needing us to be trusted advisors about, is it too soon to change, or is it that we need to change deeper than we were planning?
Yeah, I think those are all really good points. And of course, everything around things like global trade, tariffs, reliable trading partners, that's the context that we're now operating in. And I think that effect trickles down from a kind of global policy level all the way through to individual businesses that are trying to, reflect and respond to the change.
Oh, so we've made a decision that we're now moving into what we're calling next Norden, which is this increased 100 million population rather than 25 million population. It takes the Arctic nations, the ones that you can cooperate with. America and the USA are out of it because they're unreliable to cooperate. It takes the Baltic nations, the ones that you can cooperate with. So then you've got Poland, Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia all coming in. And it gives this region, which is incredibly dynamic, but they're all bound together by that consideration of being ice nations. They have a lot of ice. They have a lot of that collaboration and cooperation that they need to have. And it's quite an interesting change for us to now bring into the Norden Design Awards.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the word Nordic or Norden has taken on a huge significance actually in the last six to 12 months as well. And what's fantastic from a better future perspective is that, of course, the awards program responds and reflects that. Just to give everyone our dates, the Norden Design Awards 2026 are currently open. The program is open for nominations. The first deadline, the standard deadline, is coming up in June, and the winner's announcement is in the middle of August, 17th of August. And what's great about that is that we're also going to be doing a presentation of the Norden Design Awards in London between the 15th and 17th of September as part of the London Design Festival.
And that's great because we can take those winning projects and the design studios and include them in our design exchange program that we'll be doing during London Design Festival as well. So you're getting both the recognition opportunity and also the development of foreign trade in there. So that's going to be a fantastic focus to go bring those two together. But what I find really interesting is it's, are you running ahead of the tide? Now, one of our great collaborators, Kirsten Mann, who's worked in the tech industry for a long time, and has been co-host with me on numerous podcasts. Kirsten always talks about the burning platform. And the idea in the tech industry is that you're actually on this platform, but it's burning behind you. And you need to build out in front faster than the flames are actually destroying behind you. And it seemed like that wasn't how the rest of the world was working. But we're now seeing a year since America's decided to leave the ordered structures of the world, that the rate that we need to change is that burning bridge is happening very fast, and things we used to rely on are gone. And we need to work out how to build forward, work out what next is, and focus on, are we actually building strategic opportunities in the future? And you may notice I use the plural, opportunities. There isn't only going to be one future. There's going to be 3 or 4 different futures that people need to be planning for. Again, fantastic times for designers who are thinking about the solutions of the future and working with their clients on how that can happen.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good message because opportunity multiplies just as conditions change. So, therefore, the Norden region has got the ability to work more collaboratively and look at opportunities. And I think that also goes for how the rest of the world engages directly. So, not just as a kind of strategic location, but as a culture and as a dynamic and very design led set of economies as well.
Well, thanks for spending some time with me so that we can dig into a microcosm of how our world might be evolving. Norden is a really great example. It's always been a great example, the Scandinavian countries, of where the future might start. Their mixture of social progress, economic pragmatism, and just being matter of fact about it has always helped guide us. So it's been fantastic to do this deep dive, and I look forward to catching up with you on the next Leaders Report.
Great. Thanks, Mark. Take care and enjoy the rest of your time in Stockholm.